Good morning. It's hard to quantify what it is since we're still not back to normal. There's still so much that has to happen for us to get back to the days of yore where we sat here all together without masks. But on a morning like this, I guess what I would have to say is it exudes some hope, right? As we look, and there is hope that eventually, at some point, the Lord will bless us to be able to be all back the way that we remember. It has been a tough go, and I will tell you, there is so much to be thankful for in the unity in a congregation during a time like this. The verses that we're going to look at this morning are in 2 Peter. And we're going to particularly focus on the word virtue. But I want you to go with me back to 2 Peter chapter 1. And I'll show you the very first memory verse that I ever had. And in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, it says, "Seeing that His divine power has granted to us everything pertaining to life and godliness through the knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and excellence." That's the very first memory passage I had. And of course, in front of a crowd, I have to read it because I'm afraid I'll say it wrong. It was the very first passage I ever memorized. And this idea that God had granted to us everything that we needed for life and godliness, everything you need to know about how to live, and everything you need to know about being close to God, that He's granted you knowledge of those things, was so inspiring to me. But from there, Peter continues with that great and magnificent promise. In verse 4, he says, "By these He has granted us His precious and magnificent promises, so that by them you may become partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world by lust." The whole point of God granting to us the knowledge of life and godliness is, with it comes this promise that you and I would be able to live in a way so that we can be people who partake of it. You're not just simply seeing it from a distance, but it's something that you're actually enjoying because you are living it. And then he goes in verse 5 to talk about how does that process work. How do we go from taking the words on the page to now moving to being people who are living that life, and it is functional in how we live day to day. And he gives us this list. Starting in verse 5, he says, "For this very reason also, applying all diligence, in your faith supply virtue. And in your virtue, knowledge, and in your knowledge, self-control, and in your self-control, perseverance. And in your perseverance, godliness, and in your godliness, brotherly kindness, and in your brotherly kindness, love. For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they render you neither useless nor unfruitful in the true knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ." You can think of these as almost, each of these different things are rungs in a ladder for us to eventually get to that final stage where we are people who are not just pursuing perseverance or godliness or brotherly kindness, all of which are wonderful things, but we've reached the point of love. And we're told and we're promised that if these qualities of yours are increasing, you're going to bear fruit. If you're working on these things, you will bear fruit. And this morning, we're going to look at just one of those traits. We're going to look at the trait of virtue, which is an oft overlooked element in this ladder. We talk about brotherly kindness a lot. We talk about love a lot. We talk about godliness a lot. We talk about perseverance a lot. But we do not often talk about the term virtue. Many of your translations translate it moral excellence. And yet it comes before all the other rungs in the ladder. You start with faith. Here is the faith that's been given to us, all these precious and magnificent promises. We've been told everything we need to know for life and godliness. So you grab onto the ladder and say, okay, where do I go to now? And the very next rung is virtue. And yet we often don't talk about it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to simply look at what virtue is and how to have it and how to live in a way that brings fruit to our life. The first thing that I want you to understand about virtue is that the word virtue is an extreme word. Somebody who is virtuous has shown an extreme version of things. Virtues are never talked about in half measures. We would never say of a guy, you know, he's occasionally sober. We would never say that as a good thing, right? From time to time, he's honest. We would never call that a virtue. It is only a virtue when you do it to the extreme level. When you are always sober-minded. When you tell the truth at all cost. When you are brave in the face of all adversity. You don't get credit for being brave once in a while. Courage is found in extremes. Honesty is found in extremes. Humility is found in extremes. These are words that simply talk about things when somebody has done a thing to the furthest degree possible, so much so that you cannot imagine them ever telling a lie, or being drunk, or running from the fight. That's when we call it a virtue, which is why many of your translations translate it moral excellence. We're talking about the idea of taking faith, that first rung in the ladder, and saying, okay, God says to be these certain things. Which am I going to choose? Am I going to look at those things and say, when God tells me to do something, I'll do it just enough? And the Bible says to love your wife. You go, well, just enough so she doesn't hit me with the frying pan. Is that the goal? When God tells us to be honest, or to love our neighbor as ourselves, when He tells us to pursue unity with the brotherhood, are we going to do it to minor levels, to just enough, or will we choose the extremes? That's what virtue is. In fact, the word virtue, if you go back to its roots, it really means manliness or valor. In Latin, that ver of virtue means manliness or a hero. A man of courage. The original Greek word that is translated is a word that means a man that can lift. You have a big moving party, and there's a big couch or television or something, and everybody looks around and they go, yeah, let's have that guy do it. That's what virtue is. The man that can lift. Somebody who is not a boy anymore. They're not a child anymore. But they've accepted to be the fullest version of adulthood. Now, don't mistake me. We're not just talking about this being a trait for men, because Proverbs 31 talks about the virtuous woman. But its roots are in this idea of being a grown-up adult. To be somebody of moral excellence is to say, I'm not going to do just enough to get by anymore. Remember when you did that in school? You know, you're going through school, it's like, so exactly how much do I have to do to pass this class? I'm not really interested in valedictorian or honors or anything like that. I want the piece of paper that says I did it. Some of you are going, I didn't know such people existed. Good for you. The rest of us don't understand you. But good for you. Some of you go, was he in my classroom? Right? We all have those moments in life where we just go, I just want to get it done. I don't have to be the best. I just don't want to be the worst, right? It's like when you're having a bear chasing you. You don't have to be the fastest. You just have to be faster than your friend. Virtue is the opposite of that. It's not getting by anymore. It's not just flying under the radar so you're not the worst Christian. Not just showing up to services enough so that the elders don't give you a call. Not just acting and saying the right things so that people don't know, but the rest of the time there's a different you that they aren't aware of. But it's becoming the person that Jesus said, it's not about praying in the public square. If you go into your inner room, you're praying there too, because it's between you and God. Jesus wasn't saying don't pray publicly. That was not his point. His point was don't be somebody who that's the only time you pray. There's going to be some times in your life where you're going to give and people will know that you were giving and there was just no way for you to avoid it. It was a giving act you were doing and they were aware of it. But if that's the only time you give is when you're going to get credit for it, you have your reward in full. Virtue is when you start reaching a point where you're not interested in what the right hand and the left hand know about each other. You just want to do the good work. That's being full grown. Virtue is that characteristic that says, I'm simply going to be good even if nobody reciprocates. I'm going to be patient even when the people I'm being patient with are not people I feel like I should have to be patient with. I'm going to sacrifice even if I never get credit. And I'm going to say what needs to be said even if under great pressure. And the great thing about virtue is 2 Peter chapter 1 verse 5, before saying virtue, there's one other word right before it. And that word is supply. Supply virtue. Well, we know what supplies are. They're the things that you bring to the table. If you ever go camping, you bring your supplies. And if you've ever gone camping and you thought you packed something and you got there and you didn't. I went camping one time. My dad was in charge of a bunch of ne'er-do-well teenagers. He was a scary human being as a teacher. My father, at one point, was a junior high school teacher, and they took all of the trouble kids, and they said, we're going to call this Project Challenge, so it has a really cool title, and then we're going to take the scariest teacher in the school, and we're going to put him in charge of these boys, and he's going to do things like take them camping and stuff. Don't feel bad for those boys. I was raised by that man. And when he would take them camping, he would take me too. And there were a lot of skills that they just didn't have. A lot of them didn't have dads at home. They didn't have people who cared about them, had never taught them how to do some of the critical thinking that's needed to reach adulthood and manliness. It's a major problem in this world. It's not going anywhere soon. And so I remember we went camping one time, and there are 3 boys, and he had asked them over and over again, you got everything? He gave them a checklist. Did you get everything? Yeah, Mr. Beyer, we got everything. Get there, no tent. We're camping in Washington State. Most people don't know a lot about Washington, but they do know it's wet. And those boys slept outside under the stars because it's Project Challenge. Here's the thing, if you show up camping and you don't have what you said you would bring, whose fault is that? It's on you. You didn't put the work in, or you didn't put the forethought in. You can't blame anybody else. You packed it in, you packed it out, it's on you. That's what supplies are. The thing that you bring to the table. Which means virtue. Virtue is not something that other Christians can have, but you can't. It's not a talent. Some people I know who are really talented musically, really talented artistically. There are people who just have a mind for certain things, and we've all met them and go, wow, I don't know how you do that. And for them, they don't even think of it as anything special because it comes naturally to them. My stick figures don't look like stick figures. But I have a son who just naturally sits down and draws. Now, he's turned it into a skill because he does it a lot. But he has a natural gift there. Talents and skills, that's the separating point. Talent is what you naturally got. Skills, what you do with what you got. Supply virtue. When we talk about supplying virtue, what we're talking about is you can choose moral excellence. You don't have to look around and say, oh, but other Christians are good at that. That's just not me. It's not true. You can grab that rung of the ladder just like anybody else. In 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 8 through 9, as we read through that list of all the different things you can gain, at the very end there it says, "For if these things are yours and abound, they make you to be not idle, nor unfruitful unto the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. For he that lacks these things is blind, seeing only what is near, having forgotten the cleansing from his old sins." He said the only reason that you wouldn't have from faith supply virtue and move up the ladder is because you are idle and blind. An idle person is somebody who won't put in the work. A blind person is somebody who can't see. Here, he specifies, he says, the lack these things is blind, seeing only what is near. You know why a lot of times we don't add virtue to our faith? I'm not thinking far enough ahead. I'm thinking about what I want right now. I'm not thinking about heaven and who I want to be when I meet God on the judgment day. If every morning we woke up and we didn't think near, but we thought far, today I'm going to do some things so that whenever it is that I meet my Lord, I will be better equipped to be the kind of person I would want him to meet. That he will not find me idle nor unfruitful. That's virtue. That's what you bring to the table. If you're going to be married, do it well. If you're going to have kids, do it well. If you're going to have friends, be the best friend they have. They don't have to be your best friend, by the way. In fact, I think that that would be a wonderful thing, wouldn't it? If every Christian, with the people in their life who are not Christians, thought of you as their best friend, even though you may have people who you are much closer to, because of the quality of person you chose to be. When you chose to be somebody's friend, you were going to be the best. You go to work, do it well. Choose excellence, that you are going to be the kind of person who is not idle. You're going to put in the work and the forethought to do it properly. Because that's all virtue requires, are those two things, work and forethought. You have to get up in the morning and think about the kind of person you want to be. And then you got to put the work in. And it can't happen sporadically. It can't be, I did it one time, right? It can't be the New Year's resolution kind of thing. Virtue doesn't come that way. It has to be a lifestyle. Another way to think of virtue is to think of its opposite, vice. We have virtue and we have vice. Vice was described one time as the forerunner of sins. A vice is not necessarily a sin in and of itself, but a good way to think of it is that vice is that needed personal indulgence, even when it goes against what is healthy or beneficial. A $5 latte is not wrong. But if you need that $5 latte so much that when you know of somewhere else that $5 should go, and you choose the latte anyways, you now have a problem. Sitting down on the couch and relaxing, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But when it comes time to get up off that couch, and you are unwilling to do so, then it becomes a problem. There are many things in life to indulge yourself in. Reading books is an indulgence for me. I like reading. But when those books take me away from my responsibilities, then they become what Solomon said, through much learning there's weariness. So it just becomes a vanity. Or if reading those books, I end up coming across books where I'm beginning to read and it's enjoyable, but the things that I'm putting in my mind are no longer godly things. Not all that is written is worthy of being read. Not all that is on television is worthy of being watched. But when I reach the point of saying, but I need this, that's when you know you have a vice. They asked a 4-star general one time how to define leadership. And he says, leadership, the cost of leadership is self-interest. If you wish to be a leader, you're going to have to give up your self-interest. It can't be about you anymore. And I would argue that at the root of virtue is the very idea of that. You have to be aspiring to something more than personal indulgence, more than just the thing that you want and what you would enjoy and me time and my personal interests. It has to be about something bigger than those things. In James chapter 5, verses 5 through 7, James would speak to the saints and he said, you've lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You've fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. And then he'll go on to say, be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits, and go on to talk about how farmers work. See, the problem with personal indulgence and luxury is that they tend to make us fat. They tend to make us lazy. They don't help us with moral excellence. They tend to focus on what do I get out of it and how quickly can I get it. Do you remember when you'd order something on Amazon and all they sold were books, and it took a really long time to get there, and it was just novel that it showed up? If you had to wait 2 weeks for a book, it's funny how it all changes, isn't it? During the pandemic, one of the things that happened is you couldn't go into libraries. So my family's been really big frequenters of libraries. And so one of the things that we did, because we couldn't get into libraries, is all of a sudden the best way to get books from the library was digitally. So we had some Kindles, and so you go online and you just hit a button and all of a sudden pop, it's on your kid's Kindle. My kids think when you get a library book, it'll be there in 30 seconds. And you don't have to return it. It just goes away on its own. The amount of library fees that I paid. They will never know those things. It's an indulgent culture. So you're going to have to learn to do some hard things to counteract that. You're going to have to learn to do some things that require you to wait. They've done some studies on watching videos load on YouTube. If it takes 2 seconds, you will begin to lose people. If the video takes more than 2 seconds, you will begin to lose people. If it takes more than 10 seconds, you've lost 50% of your audience. 50% of us have a 10-second attention span. We're goldfish. I mean, this is what has happened to us. Remember the farmer and how he waits. That's how you get virtue. We become a nimble society that does things quickly. We're agile and flexible. We adjust. We get new things and we learn them fast. But we've learned some of the skills that are necessary. We've lost some of the skills that are necessary to do things that cannot be done nimbly. Because at the end of the day, virtue takes time. I asked online one time about what character traits from the Bible and from Bible heroes people wished they had. And I posted it, and I walked away, and then I came back to my computer like 6 hours later, and it had just blown up. People were commenting left and right. Everybody had a character trait from a Bible hero that they wished that they had. Things like, I wish I had the humility of Moses, or the bravery of David. I wish I had the grace of Esther, or the patience of Job. And the list went on and on and on and on. For all these character traits that people had seen in people that they read about in the Bible. And those are the precious and magnificent promises. That is the example God has given us for all things that pertain to life and godliness. We can look at these people who've lived before us and we can learn from them. And then I realized every one of the character traits that they had, that everybody wanted, the reason we wanted them and didn't have them is because it takes an awful lot of time to get those things. There's no P90X for humility. And it's not like P90X is easy either. If any of you have actually done that, you are my hero. The reality is that anything that really matters of building into your life is going to take time to get it done. People who really deeply know the Word gave up a lifetime to learn it. People who are really humble, who understand their place in the cosmos and how great God is and how small we are. And it's not that it's not fake humility, by the way. We've all seen the fake humility where it's like, oh, well, you know, I'm nothing much. And what they really mean is, please tell me how I'm something much. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who, they really know how they belong in things, and they understand God is big and they're small, and they've counted the days that they have on this planet, and they understand, you know, I'm not needed, but maybe I can do some important things. I don't matter, but I matter to God, and so that's all that matters. They've got that stuff figured out. It's not that they're thinking of themselves as less than other people and other people as more, but they just understand what life is about and what really matters. That kind of humility, that comes through time and effort, and most of the time through getting your teeth kicked in. They've been through it. And they chose the narrow path over and over and over again. Mike read Philippians 4:8. And in that is all this list of things. Pure and lovely and good. And it says meditate on these things. That word meditate, it's to chew the cud. You see a cow out in the field? Reach down, takes a bite, chews it, swallows it. Here's where we get gross. Erps it back up, chews it, swallows it, erps it back up, chews it. He's meditating on that grass. He knows every flavor of that grass. You want to learn how to have virtue? You have to chew the cud. In Hebrews chapter 5, verse 14, it says, solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. You want to get good at talking to your friends and neighbors about the gospel, you're just going to have to do it over and over and over again. And you get a little bit better every time. You want to be a better parent? You just get involved with your kids, and then you be a lousy parent for a while, and then you be a little less lousy parent, and then maybe someday you might have a brilliant moment where you were a great parent that day. Don't worry, give it 5 minutes. And you just keep at it. And you chew the cud. You want to learn how to say and speak in a way that's righteous and noble? You don't do it by keeping your mouth shut. You do it by learning to talk, learning to think, asking good questions. You chew the cud. You meditate on these things. You fill your brain with good things. Garbage in, garbage out is a truth, but so also is the truth that you put good things in and you will get good things out. But you won't get them out tomorrow. In fact, I can guarantee you, if you decide to improve on something, you walk out of here and you say, I am going to begin to do fill in the blank. You've reflected on it. You said, I need to show moral excellence in the way I handle my finances, or I need to show moral excellence in the way that I work at my job, or you fill in the blank, whatever it is. You walk out and you say, I'm going to start doing that. The first thing that's going to happen is the wheels are going to fall off that thing. And you're going to have problems in that area. and you're going to want to quit like every New Year's resolution. And I want to tell you, faith, supply, virtue. You just hang in there. A little bit of improvement every day, and the same action practice over and over again leads to excellence. It's the second rung in the ladder. We've been given faith. We've been given the precious and magnificent promises that pertain to life and godliness. Grab the rung of excellence. Strive for more. You can supply that. The Lord's designed you to do so. The invitation song will be at this time. If you have not obeyed the gospel, the very first thing, you haven't grabbed the ladder yet. You haven't grabbed the first rung. You must place your faith in Jesus to climb that ladder. And He has told us what we should do. He who believes and is baptized shall be saved. If you're ready to be baptized and wash away your sins, do not wait. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. The world is a crazy place. You have no guarantees. If you know what you need to do, wait no longer to do it as we stand and sing the invitation song.